we really have to change our way of approaching these things. It doesn't mean that we have done wrong things. No, we have done exactly the right things. I think it's the biggest momentum for decades that we have to admit that we have to change our way of creating the trust, the trusted partnerships.
Hello, welcome back. Welcome back to our podcast, The Zero Hunger Project. I'm your host, Suman.
I'm Stacia.
And today we're going to talk about this topic from diplomacy to dinner plates, global cooperation for a hunger-free future. And who do we have today?
Today we're joined by Ville Scanari, Finland's former Minister for Development Cooperation and Foreign Trade, who served from 2019 to 2023. Throughout his tenure, Minister Scanari was a leading voice on the global stage for ethical trade, gender equity, and multilateral cooperation, with a sharp focus on food security and sustainable development. As a key architect of Finland's international development agenda, he helped direct significant funding and policy support towards climate-resilient agriculture, smallholder empowerment, and inclusive food systems. His leadership emphasized that food is not simply a basic need, but a fundamental right, one that must be protected through coordinated action between governments, civil society, and the global trade system. Minister Scanari also played a major role in Finland's involvement in the School Meals Coalition, co-chaired with France and the World Food Programme, and was named a Global School Meals Champion. He helped showcase Finland's long-standing model of universal free school meals as a powerful example of how public policy can promote equity, health, and learning. At the time when food systems face unprecedented strain from conflict, climate volatility, and economic stability, the minister brings a deep experience and bold thinking about how diplomacy, international cooperation, and rights-based development can chart a course towards a hunger-free future. How does it feel to hear yourself being described that way? Because it's pretty cool.
Well, it is pretty cool. And of course, Finland has been a forerunner in the fields of education. And as you describe yourself, school meal for everybody is a great example. But of course, the other side of the coin is that it also makes me sad. If I look at the current world, if I look at the development financing, how it's being deployed, or what kind of crises we are facing as far as children and hunger all over the world. So, of course, as a minister, I was very happy that so many countries, even 80 countries, joined our school meal coalition throughout the world.
Amazing.
So, of course, my message today is that let's keep on going and let's not give up.
That's so true. And Canada was one of the last of the G7s to jump on the bandwagon of school meal last year. And we have been advocating for years, and finally we saw some movement. Though it is not ideal, but it's a great step that last year Canada took. And we have always looked at Finland as a very successful model that Finland has put forward. So thank you so much for that.
I wanted to ask you, Minister, we talk a lot about how hunger is political on this podcast. And during your tenure as the Minister for Development Cooperation, how did you view hunger as a political and diplomatic challenge, not just a humanitarian one?
Well, first of all, in Finland, we defined development policy as a crucial part of the foreign and security policy. So I think this is extremely important if you look at the current turbulent world with wars and crises all over. In other words, it means that if you don't have sustainable development, as for instance in the field of education, you cannot solve the problems anymore when it comes to foreign and security policy. And therefore it's so important to see, let's say, the holistic approach as a right approach for the world now. But of course, at the same time, we must be honest. The entities like UN are facing huge difficulties. The entities like European Union, which I represent as well as a Finn, we have huge difficulties in implementing our great visions and great programs. So as a minister, many times I said that we should have the implementation layer in place. We say a lot that let's involve the private sector, let's get local, let's act local. But if you don't have the ownership at the end of the day, at the country platform, there is nothing you can do that much.
That's so true. But do you think, Minister, from Finland's perspective or EU's perspective, North American perspective, what is this hindrance that keeps on happening? Why is implementation so challenging?
Well, if I look at 10, 20, 30 years back, 1990s, 1980s, I think at that time, things were complicated as well, but we kept things simple. And at this stage, if I look at the world and if I look at the European Union, I think in a way we have over-programmed ourselves. We have great programs, we have great PowerPoints at the country level, at the local level. But at the end of the day, if we don't have the ownership, as I said earlier, meaning the local platform, I just got back from Central Asia, for instance, from Kazakhstan. And I just give you an example that if you look at these countries, which have basically all the elements for everything in place, we come to the ownership. So if there is something positive in this current situation, is that we really have to change our way of approaching these things. It doesn't mean that we have done wrong things. No, we have done exactly the right things. Mm-hmm. But if I look at, for instance, the upcoming Sevilla conference when it comes to development, collaboration and financing, I think it's the biggest momentum for decades that we have to admit that we have to change our way of creating the trusted partnerships. And actually, school meals is a great example that it's a local level implementation, like what Finland did in the 1940s in the middle of the war. Mm-hmm. Did we have money? No. Did we have peace? No. We were literally in a war. But our decision makers, they decided that, hey, let's create something which is far more than just a plate of food. It's the whole education. It's a core of the education system. Mm-hmm. And I think, in a way, I'm criticizing the current way of how the governments are allocating funding as far as only talking about allocations, not the results. So I think that I also see this as an opportunity to really communicate that what we can do better.
I mean, it sort of takes the sting out of other people's arguments when they say they don't have the resources to do something, when Finland did it in the middle of a war. Like, really? I'm pretty sure you can figure it out. Exactly. We've got a lot of things going on right now that were not possible, and yet Finland still pulled it off.
So, Minister, Finland has been recognized for its commitment to the UN SDGs. What specific SDG 2 related strategies did you help implement for support?
Well, if we look at the SDGs as a whole, as a system, let's call it as a system level development. We often say that we have to work on the supply chains, right? We have to diversify from geopolitical risks and so forth. This is what you hear every day at the political level or from the civil servants. But I think what we did as Finland and what I did as a minister, if we look at the food sector as a whole, the value chain, it's not just an end product. You have to look at the agriculture. You have to look at the fertilizer system, that how we get fertilizers in place in Africa, in South America, even here in Europe, Asia, all over the world, literally. And then we can talk about, let's say, that how we manage and work with the value chain. And I think for Finland, as a small country, as a relatively small country, it's always important that we can understand that where we can add value. Because in this world of Mr. Trump, Mr. Putin, Mr. Xi, it's always the superpowers, they do what they do. But we as small countries, we have to define and navigate in order to really build up the sustainable platform. And I think it comes to the question of resilience. It comes to the question of comprehensive security, where the SDGs actually play a key role. And what I'm afraid now, where the countries like the UK, for instance, all of a sudden they announced that, hey, we put our development policy financing into weapons, to military. At the end of the day, this is a dramatic mistake by Europeans because it's not comprehensive. Look at the medical sector, look at the food sector, look at even the technology sector. Because if you just go with, let's say, traditional arms and weapons, instead of really understanding how the economics, technologies are developing and have developed, we come to the SDG 2 as well. That how we really look at the, let's say, scaling up. We have enough innovations in this world. We don't have to innovate anything anymore.
Yeah.
All we have to do is implement and build up the trust at the local level. So I think this was pretty much my message as a minister, and I could repeat myself for the future purposes as well.
I think one of the time-tested, proven ways that countries, communities, governments can scale up and expand is to include women more in the conversation. Can you talk a little bit about gender parity in Finland and how women-led farming initiatives, for example, have been key to building food security and capacity building programs in Finland?
Well, first of all, I want to point out that even we have a lot to do still with the gender equality in my country, in Finland. So, but we have started, as you know, long time ago. So if I look at the gender equality, if I look at education, working life, that people are equal. Women, girls, boys and men, they can access the education or working life with the same terms and conditions. Pretty much. Of course, we still have something to improve. Let's look at the maternity leave, for instance. I think it's a very pragmatic example that how we approach that. But as a minister, I really try to convince my colleagues all over the world that if you invest in gender equality, it's an investment into your economy.
For everyone.
Why? Because then you can really boost your job market, supply, everything. And I think Finland is a great example that how women get back to work after having a baby, like we are all having those examples in the Nordic countries. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, it's a question how we approach the things. But I must be honest, it's not easy. I mean, even here in Europe, within the EU, we are not that unanimous in everything. So we still have a lot to do. But I think in this current world where everything is about money, about security, and let's say it's getting rough. It's more, and all these extremes are in place. Mm-hmm. So we just have to prove our way of thinking and our values with the facts. And that is how we can build a dialogue. And I think always it's been, even with Trump administration, I had a great dialogue because we focused on positive narrative, not the negative things. So I believe still in a dialogue in each and every part of the world.
That is so true, and I hope everybody's listening because we need that dialogue now more than ever with the geopolitical situation. So, Minister, you have talked about ethical trade a lot during your years in the government. Now, what does ethical trade actually look like when it's applied to the food system?
Well, Finland has pretty unique minister portfolio because we have combined the Minister of Trade and Development into one. We have countries like Netherlands, if I remember right, New Zealand, having the same. So I think this is good because we always say that trade and aid and development, they all go hand in hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
But my experience was very good because I could act as a minister of trade at the EU level, at the global level, but also as a minister of development. Why it is important? Because let's look at the food sector and the ethics, whatever. Even when we are doing trade agreements, we like now as a European, we talk a lot about the upcoming Mercosur agreement with South America or India. It's a big one. For us, it's always important that we have certain, let's say, elements in place as far as climate, as far as sustainability, but of course, also rule of law and gender issues. And this is a dialogue what we have with our colleagues and counterparts all over the world. So it's just one example that we try to prove that ethics is also important when it comes to food sector. My other point is women entrepreneurship. I did work a lot with startups before in my life, in London, in Tokyo, in Amsterdam. Although I'm a Finn, I've been around. So I was very proud when my country, Finland, provided the world with so many young and even more experienced women and girl entrepreneurs. And as a minister, I worked very hard with this segment at the international level. And believe me, you can do pretty good things and big things with quite small steps. And I think this is something what we should bear in mind when we look at the ethics, because at the end of the day, it's also a matter of gender equality. That all of a sudden you realize that if you look at, well, it's quite a famous example, is the coffee sector, right? That how many entrepreneurs we educated, how many entrepreneurs we finance, but it's not enough unless you don't have the sustainable business. And then you need trade. You need the cash flow. You need everything in place. And of course, once again, in small countries, it's sometimes easier, but even in different parts of Africa, I learned that it's doable and it's done in many ways. So many good things happen, but at the end of the day, the biggest problem is that we couldn't scale up. It was always projects what we initiated. It was not a system level. And once again, we were missing the country platform. So we come to exactly the same question and answer what we indicated before.
So then what structural reforms, I mean, if you could sort of wave a magic wand, what structural reforms would you call for? How do you keep hunger at the center of international cooperation rather than competition? How do you make this something that we're all participating in instead of pitting each other against?
Well, we spoke earlier about the value chains, but do we really understand what is meant by sustainable food value chain? I said things about the fertilizers. So as Nordics, together with Norway, Sweden, Denmark, and Finland, we did really build up the supply chains during the COVID time. And I think fertilizers are a great example that how we really get the agriculture sustainable when it comes to price level, for instance, and quality as well. But then secondly, let's look at the logistics, global logistics. This is more now like geopolitics, but you must understand that if you want to do sustainable food systems, you have to have logistics in place.
Of course, yeah.
Which means that if you look at China, US, the current situation in Iran, if you look at the key points and bottlenecks of global logistics, of course, it comes to the security. Let's look at Ukraine. Let's look at the Black Sea. So one must understand, and once again, I repeat myself, food systems are part of the foreign and security policy.
Right.
So, and having said this, I come to my third point, which is, of course, that we have to have the skills, the education of building up sustainable food systems. And then we come to the industrial capabilities. When I visited different African countries, I could give you many, many examples, but let's take Tanzania, for instance. I mean, you have everything in place when it comes to raw materials, when it comes to the nature, everything. But let's look at the logistics. Let's look at the education level. Let's look at the level of entrepreneurship. Let's look at the trade agreements. So once again, the country platform is not there. Let's go further to South America. Let's go to Brazil, to Amazon, or even in some quite developed Asian countries. So I think my fourth point is that if and when we say that United Nations is important, the World Food Program is important, yes, they are more important than ever. But at the same time, we are cutting financing, the so-called basic financing. And at the same time, we realize that the food sector, the food systems, they are not on the top of the agenda of the superpowers. Yeah, that's why it's complicated.
What grade would you give the Nordic countries in terms of their performance on this front?
Well, of course, we try as Nordics, we try to work as one. Nordics together, we are a pretty strong platform. So it comes to the foreign and security policy, it comes to the global problem solving. So I think my statement is that we should really be solution-driven instead of entity-driven.
Right.
With all my respect. We have great entities in the history of the world, in the history of Europe, but now we need to build up different coalitions that can solve the problems. Whether it comes to food, whether it comes to security, as we have noticed in Europe, whether it comes to each and every important critical elements of human being and human lives. So world is different now, and Nordics, we could and we should pave the way for this kind of development. And that's why we work hard now with Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Iceland and Finland to really prove that we can deliver. But at the same time, I must be honest and frank with you. Even our governments are making huge cuts to the development policy. It is a political question at the end of the day.
Yes.
And of course, at the end of the day, as always in politics, it's a matter of will.
Yeah.
100%. So, Minister, we are actually currently in the process of having the youth activated in Canada with the World Food Forum, like many countries around the world. So we have a lot of youth actually watching this or listening to this podcast. So what would you offer to the young leaders who want to work at the intersection of foreign policy, food system, and social justice?
Well, my first advice is that please travel. Please build up the partnerships. Please do it. Use time. Go to the places which are the most challenging ones. Because if you just stick and stay with the like-minded countries, you won't get the answers. You won't get the dialogue.
Right.
My second point is, of course, that it's good to work for both, for public and private sector. I started when I was 21. I moved abroad. I worked in Japan for a leading trading house when I was 23. That was my best education, because I had to understand how the world is really working and functioning, how the global trade is working, and of course, how the politics are there. But and my third point is that instead of just repeating the problems and challenges, be solution driven. Build up different coalitions for different purposes, build up the trust, because if you get that, then you find the money, then you find the sustainable development. But I think the most important thing right now in this world is the trust.
100%. That's so very well said.
So I ask the same question to all of our guests, the same two questions. The first one is, what is it that we're not talking about in these conversations? What is the point that we're missing? What is the thing that you wish people would ask you more about?
The atmosphere is difficult right now because everybody talks about security, wars, threats. And as I indicated earlier, we should define the comprehensive security in its wide definition, meaning that food systems, minerals, technologies, everything, they are important. And this is what I try to explain to my colleagues and countrymates here in the Nordics. And the history proves that this is the right way to approach it. Because if we don't have the social dimension for the young people, for everybody, and if we don't have the strong middle class, what's going to happen? We end up in all these extremes.
What is your best case scenario moving forward for Finland, for the Nordic countries, for the world at large in terms of capacity building, coalition building, community building? What is your pie in the sky best case scenario for all of this?
Well, that is a question of the summer. Well, I think first of all, we need to learn from the history. We have had wars before. We have had threats before. Difficult situations, especially here in Finland or in many, many places in the world. But we should learn that we shouldn't leave anybody behind. I'm most worried that how we cut from our young people, from education, from those who have the least. And if we do that mistake, this conversation is very short. Because we are losing the Nordic model, the Nordic welfare model, as we call it. So what I want to emphasize is that although we have threats and we have wars, we should maintain our approach, which is comprehensive. So having said this, of course, we have to build up the resilience, but in our Finnish way of thinking and in our comprehensive security definitions, food sector plays a key role in our resilience. It's a public-private partnership. We work with the entrepreneurs, we work with the companies. It's contractual. So if I could use this opportunity to tell you and the world that you need to be comprehensive, you need to build up the societal model which involves everybody. Yeah. If you just go with the silo of security, with the silo of energy, with the silo of education, it won't work. But this is a very complex question, and it's a very complex when it comes to politics, because at the end of the day, we as politicians, we love to allocate funding, right? Yeah. And it's always more complicated to do it in a comprehensive way.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Minister, before we let you go, I have to ask this question. You're so knowledgeable, and you were a federal minister till 2023. What's next for you?
Maybe that's the question of the summer.
Well, I've been very lucky in my life. I'm a second-generation minister, second-generation member of parliament. I've been in professional politicians for more than 10 years. So, of course, I'm only 51. So I would love to help not just my country, but the world. And if I look at the current challenges, current solutions, there are many people who I consider as soulmates. So we try to navigate now. We try to build up the trust. We try to build up the solution in different parts of the world. But once again, as this conversation has proven already, we have to build up the platforms. Food is a great example. So hopefully I can continue with this mission. It can be in Finland, it can be elsewhere, but I really appreciate that we have the opportunity for this dialogue, because if we lose our hope and we just give up, saying that it's not feasible, it's not doable, it's not possible, then we have nothing. So, but it's honestly, now it's the biggest task for us is to really deliver. And hopefully I can do even better in the future.
That's so amazing. So everybody, we heard from Minister Skinnari. We have a lot more of Minister Skinnari to come in the next few years.
Yeah, it's going to be out in the world.
It is going to be there, and it is the outlook, like what we have heard, is what's going to take us to the next level.
So
thank you so much for your time. We
Thank
really
you for
appreciate
joining
it.
us.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate your great work.
Thank you.
And we
you have a
appreciate
great evening.
yours. Take care.
What an enriching conversation.
I mean, the people that we're getting to talk on this podcast are incredible. Like, they're doing badass things all over the world.
It is, and when I'm trying to recap, I don't even know where to start and where to end.
There's a lot.
Because my recap would probably take as long time as it took to even have a chat with him.
Mm-hmm.
There is so much value that almost every line of his we had to unpack.
Well, I just think because he has such monumental experience, and I think because he was at such a high level inside the Finnish government, that he's able to have a level of clarity and understanding of the problem, which I think is the first part of dialogue. The most enriching conversations we've had have been with guests who really understand the breadth and scope of the problem.
True, but I wish that I could say that for every elected official around the world.
Okay, well,
That we can't.
no.
I wish that ministers from every country of the world had this much knowledge and understanding of the monumental problem that we have today.
And the thing that I liked about what Ville was talking about is that he's looking at all of this from sort of a meta level, from a policy level, from a governmental level, but at every turn he kept talking about relationships and about, again, we come back to this notion of mutual care and how if you don't have that, there's virtually no point in doing anything.
No, which was, you touched it really well. What was really very important for me is for him to talk about the local implementation, which was fascinating because somebody in the level that Mr. Skinnari was, it is often easier to talk about policy and government will and political will. But his conversation around local implementation and how that is so important and not just the policy was really eye-opening. And a good example was the school food program in the middle of a war that Finland implemented. Wow.
Yeah. That they had the presence of mind. And, I feel like the Nordic countries have such a reputation for everybody's always trying to figure out how to move to Sweden and Finland. And I've been to Finland. It's a breathtakingly beautiful country. And they have this mentality of the greater good, right? Of looking after each other, this social safety net that kind of intertwines these countries together. And I love that that's at the foundation of all of their decision making. And yet it's important to note that he was the first to say, even we, who have such a stellar reputation of looking after our citizenry, are really struggling to form coalitions that are going to be effective enough to actually do anything on the ground.
And exactly, in a country like Canada, where we are now, we are not as much like Nordic countries, but we do take pride in having a little more sensible way of approaching the government.
Social safety net.
Social safety net. But however, it took forever for us to implement anything close to a national school food program or a national school food policy. Even the last G7. So this is not easy what they have pulled in the middle of a
No,
war.
it's impossible, as a matter of fact, and yet
And
they
it's the
managed to
outlook.
do it. I know.
It's just the outlook and the political will.
we can do it of it. It's the, as you say, the political will, the social capital, the desire to lift everybody up at the same time. And his point saying, like, if we're not lifting everybody up at the same time, there's no point in doing what it is that we're doing.
Exactly. And what was also fascinating is what he talked about is the outlook on things like medical, food, technology, as opposed to just empowering arms. And how he talked about that, which is especially in today's geopolitical world.
Well, and I
It's
mean,
an interesting conversation.
well, it's an interesting conversation. It's not a very common conversation. And again, we go back to this whole notion of what the credentials of late stage capitalism look like. And nobody's having those types of conversations. There's no sort of unilateral understanding that we all have to work together. It's very divisive. As he said, it's very siloed, that your sector and my sector are at odds for the same dollar. It's the advancement of the few at the expense of the many. You know, these are very prevalent themes that are going on these days. And to be able to cut through that rhetoric and just be like, that is all well and good, and there's nothing we can do about the current geopolitical system that we find ourselves in. But inside of these systems of power that value a certain subsection of the population over literally everybody else, and typically that subsection is not even representative of the actual global population. Even with all of that, to be able to cut through that rhetoric and find a narrative that weaves everybody together, I think that's something that globally people have admired a lot about Nordic countries, and he is absolutely holding on to for dear life.
Absolutely. And I also really enjoyed when he was talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the things that he said is, we have enough innovation.
Yeah.
We need implementation.
Yeah.
And that is where we're making a mistake.
And that, interestingly, it's good that you brought that up, is not typically something that we've heard from a lot of other people. It's innovate, iterate. And he's like, look, stop. Everybody sit down for 2 hot seconds. We've already done all the stuff that needs to be done at least to get us from here to here.
100%.
Let's just concentrate on the task at hand and what we've already done. That seems like the lowest hanging fruit of them all, is that there are systems in place already. Let's try and sew them together and
Absolutely. And I
operationalize
think
them.
in a lot of developed countries, we are seeing this as a problem.
Yeah.
Is we are focusing on innovation and what is next.
Yeah.
And we are not focusing on implementation.
Yeah.
On how to implement the fantastic programs that exist. Why are we reinventing wheels?
Yeah.
Makes absolute no sense. When the wheel is invented, and we just need to make sure the wheel is in good condition.
Well, and it's a galactic waste of money also.
Yeah,
if you're out
totally.
there sort of throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, why don't you just turn inward and have a look at the stuff that's already been working and see if you
100%.
can scale that up?
Absolutely. What I really also enjoyed his points that he talked about, especially for the youth. So I'm not going to repeat them because I want everybody to look through the
He's
full-
making you do your homework.
But yeah, exactly. But his point and his recommendation for the youth, it hit me very close.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I've said this for many, many years. I think the fastest way to get context, which I happen to think, apart from love is the glue that holds the universe together, is to travel.
Yeah.
It's to see how the world exists outside of your
Bubble.
house, your community, your borders, because it will give you perspective like literally nothing else. And there are a litany of different ways to travel. It doesn't have to be first class. You can hop in a bus. I mean, there are thousands of ways you can do that. And it really will show you how the rest of the world works. And then you can start having the conversations.
100%. And to close this up, I got to say, one thing that he said kind of stuck to me, the Nordic welfare model.
Yeah.
He referred to that. And what it is, I'm paraphrasing here, no one left behind.
Yeah.
Includes everybody.
That's right.
And we love it. We respect it. In Canada, we hope that we can be that way.
We aspire to.
We aspire to it.
Mhm.
Love it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
It's a
And
great
we
conversation.
had this amazing conversation. Look at the full episode and follow us if you're able to.
Mhm.
And look at the other episodes. Minister Skinnery was really a joy.
He sure was.
Thank you and good luck.